All right, welcome everyone. This is a bonus little quick episode of Just Giants. We have some, I guess, breaking news. I guess it's not breaking news, but it's important news and
Surprising news, I would say.
yeah, and we vow to not be lazy and wait till next week. This is important, so we're going to talk about it. But essentially, Saquon Barkley signed a 1-year deal. Not something that you or I thought was going to happen, right?
I did. I mean, I didn't even think honestly it was even possible. I think pretty much once the deadline passed and there was no negotiations, to me it was just going to be when was Saquon Barkley going to cave and actually show up? How much was he going to give up? We both said in yesterday's episode we didn't think he'd miss any games. We thought he'd miss camp, probably some preseason games, but didn't show up. I guess neither of us thought the possibility was just signing a 1-year deal, and this on the surface, just feels like a face-saving move by Barkley more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's silly to say, like, oh, were you surprised? Because we just did, like, a whole, 25-minute intro to the last episode as the last time we felt like talking about Barkley until he signs the freaking tag.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even... I don't even know if our episode was out yet because I didn't even go to work yet, and it had already broken. So
I texted you this morning, and it was, I think we try to get these out, 9 o'clock each morning on Tuesdays?
9:30 the YouTube. So I think the audio version of the podcast was up at 5 a.m. So that I think beat it. But I'm telling you, by 7:30, I think it had already broken.
Well, what happened was somebody texted over to me, and I honestly thought it was
a really lame
account.
Joke.
I thought it was a spoof account. I really thought it was someone got it for it, and it's just like, this doesn't sound real. There's no, and sure enough, I actually snuck and looked into Twitter, which I haven't looked at in about a month, and sure enough, there it was. So.
And here's the deal. So the franchise tender was a 1-year fully guaranteed contract of $10.1 million. What Barkley ended up doing was signing a 1-year offer, which he was allowed to do. They were no longer allowed past July 17th to negotiate on a long-term deal, but they could still negotiate a 1-year deal. And that's what he signed, a 1-year, and I believe this is correct, an $8.1 million contract with a $2 million signing bonus. So I believe he just gets that right up front, equaling that same tender amount, $10.1 million against the cap, with incentive escalators in the amount of about $1 million. It's like $300K for each of these 3 bullet points. 11 or more total rushing or receiving touchdowns plus a team playoff berth, 65 or more receptions plus a team playoff berth, and 1,350 rushing yards, I believe it is, plus a playoff berth. Additionally, there was no additional clause preventing the use of the franchise tag next year. So a lot of this stuff I'm pretty sure about. So I'm going to keep this a little sketchy. This isn't set in stone because it is, what is it, 10:30 right now we're doing this? It's 10:30 at night. And I have been looking at this all day through Twitter and intermittently checking. And, X. I was checking X.
We'll get there.
I'll get there. And I saw conflicting information everywhere, all over the place, including by very, very reliable sources. So, per Dan Duggan, who I reached out to personally, they cannot apply the tag 2 more times just because he didn't sign the franchise tender this year. He signed a 1-year deal. They can only use it 1 more time.
The thing you talk about being murky, it's still even murky because the email that the Giants sent out, they always send out when something is official. They said that Barkley signed the franchise, the
headline, like the subject of the email said Barkley signs franchise tender.
Yeah, which is
he did not do.
He did not do. So it's murky for everybody right now.
Yeah.
I guess the question, Grump, is we're not going to say are you surprised? You are, but the obvious question is why.
Well, before we get to that, before we get to why, in 3 words or less, how do you feel with the news that we just laid out?
Obnoxious storylines averted. We don't have to have a whole year of when is he going to show up, or at least a whole off season or training camp
Month.
of Well, but still, though, a month is a
No, I
long,
agree
long
with you.
time.
Go on.
Yeah. Of is he going to show up? When is he going to show up? Is he pissed at the team? Are it fractured relations forever? What does this mean for other running backs? Blah 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 blah. It's a conversation that a team that is trying to build off of a very successful last year, the last thing they need is to hear questions every day. What do you think about Saquon? Have you talked to him? Blah blah blah. Nobody wants to deal with that. So I'm just relieved that, at least for right now, we don't have to worry about that for this season.
Damn, that really was 3 words or less. Let me tell you. Mine couldn't be happier. But we'll get to our thoughts on it. Go ahead. You tell me why. Why did this happen?
Why did this happen? I think, well, I think both sides wanted to get a potential, explosion out of the way and didn't want to deal with. Barkley realized that he has no leverage in any of this. I think he probably had a come to Jesus moment that, you know, he could potentially be losing $600,000 a game if he doesn't show up regular season games. He has the risk of becoming, the bad guy in all of this too. I was fishing today and I was talking to the guy next to me, and he's a Giant fan, and he's just like, man, fucking Barkley should have just signed the contract. I don't know why he didn't. These guys are all greedy. I don't understand it. And you know something? I think a lot of Giant fans, the longer this went out, the bad guy would be because the way it was playing out and the way it was, I think Barkley would have been the bad guy. I don't think he wanted to be the bad guy. And the Giants, I think, with all the leverage in the world, uh, they wanted to make this go away also. And I think they just, I don't know who instigated this. My guess is probably Barkley's side did. I think the Giants are ready to dig in and say, okay, we'll wait till you fold on the night before opening night against Dallas. And, with having hand, they worked out something where Barkley appears to save face. The Giants don't have to deal with this nonsense, and we will worry about this next year.
Yeah, I'll agree with that, and I think also I think Barkley did cave because remember he brought in a second agent right before the long-term extension deadline on the 17th, and while a deal didn't get done then, it's what is it, the 24th, 25th? What day is it? It was
Today's
the 25th. So not much longer. What is that? 8 days later, just over a week later or so. That's all it took to get something together that seems fair to both sides, right? I mean, Barkley doesn't have much leverage. He still is making a top 10 for this year, top 5 salary for his position. It's still a raise over last year. It's fully guaranteed. He has a chance to make it more money. This seems fair for both sides.
I think it's great. I think it's great for the Giants. I think it makes Barkley more invested in this year because team success is factoring into how much compensation he's ultimately going to get.
Bingo.
I mean, he can run for 3,500 yards this year, but if they don't make the playoffs, doesn't matter. He's not getting the money. So, having him fully, we don't want a guy who's begrudgingly showing up, who's going to be a sourpuss the whole year. It could be an issue in the locker room. That's not saying he will be, but there's a potential for it. Now this is a guy who's going to be extra motivated to do well individually, extra motivated for his team. So genius, I think, on the Giants' part.
Yeah, and I couldn't be happier because I thought he was going to play no matter what. I missed the offseason, missed preseason games, be ready for week 1. I think he'd be in shape. I think he'd be ready to go. I wasn't worried about that. The only thing I would say is that for a month and a half, like you said, we'd have to endure. And by we, I mean that means the players, the coaches. It was going to be all day. There was going to be new news stories. There's already, since this deal's been signed, there's been like 2 stories about how he was almost traded that have like come out there and have like since been like, whoa, this is kind of spin because, they explored trade options only at the request of his agents. So like all of this kind of crap would be going on, trickling out over weekends and just continuing and getting worse, and it gets on the players. And I don't really think that has a huge effect. I do think it has an effect. But what I was more worried about is that you have a guy who is going to come in week 1 and he's going to be in shape, but he will not have worked with this offense since last year. And I don't care if he's worked out with DJ in the offseason. I don't care if he has studied the playbook and can read it backwards to me in his mind. There is a chemistry that is important, and all it takes in any game on any Sunday is one colossal fuck up, and a game can turn around. I didn't think it would sink the season, but I did think between weeks 1 and 4, there could have been a moment, and we may not have even known what that moment was, but a moment where there was a mental hiccup, something got screwed, a drive got killed, a first down wasn't made, the clock ran out, and the Giants lost the game. I thought that was a legitimate possibility as an effect of the holdout. Did that sink me to my core? No. But am I happy that I think that that's pretty much off the table? Absolutely. And for what? For chump change, dude. It's less than $1 million extra and they were going to spend anyway. This could not have gone any better. I think this is actually a GM master move.
Yeah, and you know something? If we're talking about the team concept, the person I think this actually benefits the most is Daniel Jones. And let me explain why, in my opinion. Is when he signed his contract, he became the de facto leader of this team. You know, he maybe within the locker room is the face of the franchise now. He is now, for the first time in his career, you know, he's the leader. And right away, this story, you know, gain momentum. So this offseason, you know, this training camp isn't about Daniel Jones is finally, you know, the quarterback of the New York Giants going forward. No more questions about that, you know. And the first thing we have to do is all attention is on a guy who may not even be in training camp. So I think to help with the Daniel Jones process of, you know, him growing into his contract, becoming the leader, the true leader of this team, the captain of this team, all of that stuff is getting this taken care of. So I think this really will benefit him as much, you know, as it is the overall team itself.
Yeah, and you nailed it with the incentives. Like, you know, Saquon's side, I think, comes to the table with incentive ideas. Once you attach a playoff berth to each one of those incentives, which, by the way, 1,350 rushing yards, that would be either the most or the second most by just barely he's ever rushed for. He's only eclipsed 1,300 twice, and last year was one of them. Rushing.
This would be the third year of the extra game in the season too. So
well, that's true. That's true too.
Little asterisk there.
Yeah. Well, the asterisk is that in 2 years he was only able to do it once because he got hurt. I mean,
right.
So I mean,
right.
That's kind of built into the incentives as well, right?
Well, that's their thinking anyway. Why they weren't so excited about giving him a long-term deal.
Sure.
Was the questions were about, you know, durability. So now you really get to prove it with numbers attached to it.
Yeah. And, yeah, like I said, with a playoff berth attached to it, there's a team incentive. And I do think that he comes in hungry. I think he comes in ready. I think he has to do maybe 1 or 2 press conferences where this is a pain-in-the-ass conversation again, and then it just becomes business. This is just football now. And the bullshit is over.
Clip this little piece, and we'll play this back in January. I can certainly see a scenario in, you know, Week 18, playing at home against the Eagles. The Eagles have absolutely nothing to play for. The Giants playing to get into the playoffs, and Saquon Barkley needing 260 yards to hit that 1,300 threshold. Can you see him pounding the rock against the second and third team of the Eagles to get that, you know, hit that number and get his incentives? Do you see the Eagles, being the pricks that they are, actually playing to prevent him from getting it? So it kind of makes that last game of the year potentially a little more interesting than just the complete scenario we talked about last night being utterly meaningless.
That is an interesting scenario. I could see something where 260 is really high. But if it were like, let's just say it's like 260, you're thinking college. I mean, like 260 is insane. But let's think like 185 is still nuts for NFL, right? Especially against the Eagles of all teams. Like, you're talking about a team that went to the Super Bowl last year. They're already considered a favorite to go to the conference championship.
exactly, but I can guarantee you, though, in the scenario that I played out in my pencils and pens, most likely that game is most likely going to be meaningless for them. So that's not going to be the team on the field that went to the Super Bowl last year. There'll be a bunch of, second teamers and whatever. But I threw out 260 as a kind of a little bit of a silly number, but there's been precedent in other sports. Like guys like, David Robinson one year, I think he scored 71 points in the last game of the season to win the scoring title. I mean, it has happened where people who trying to make a number, just absurdly just chuck shots or guys hit first in a lineup in the last game of the year to try to give them an extra at bat so they can try to win the home run title. So funky things do happen.
Absolutely. I'm not discounting that at all. I think that's actually a really interesting thought process. And it leads me into this thing where I think somebody asked Art Stapleton if the Giants go to the playoffs and Saquon is just short on some of the, let's just say he only has 10 touchdowns total or something, or 60 receptions instead of 65, or he only hits 1,300 yards, he's short 50. But they do make the playoffs. Art seems to think that the organization would pony up the $300K for whatever escalator he's just short on. I think I agree with that, but we both talked before the show. We don't think the opposite's true, right? Like if he hits the number but the team just misses the playoffs, you're kind of shit out of luck, right?
Absolutely not. I mean, I think this is, the way that it was structured, talking about that makes complete sense. It's like, something, you did everything you can to get this team in the playoffs, and we value team over individual, and they might do that. And that may be something that brings in good favor when they are going to talk long-term deal next year. I mean, I don't know if I am Saquon, I kind of care about that necessarily, but as a good faith, I could certainly see that possibly happening.
And then in other reporting to training camp news, a number of Giants were assigned the PUP list. They have to start camp on the PUP list for it to be the PUP, which is physically unable to perform. Otherwise, it's IR. So the 6 players added to the PUP list are notable. These are not nobodies. These are not. Some of these I think are even somewhat surprising, right? Marcus McKeithen, who tore his ACL in FanFest at the practice at the stadium.
God.
Aaron Robinson, who had a rocky start to the year with appendicitis, and then in his first game back, he got really tangled up awkwardly, and I don't remember what he did.
Right. Not good.
I think he shredded his knee up or some shit like that. DJ Davidson, who got hurt last year, late in the year, defensive tackle. A'Shawn Robinson, who just got here. Wan'Dale Robinson and Sterling Shepard, both with ACLs from last year. And on the non-football injury list, Jamison Crowder. So with that said, I think the Cole Beasley signing makes even more sense. I thought that Cole Beasley came in here to be veteran competition for Sterling Shepard. And I also don't think that Shepard's going to be on the PUP list too long. I think he was already moving around really well in the spring. He was notably more active than Wan'Dale Robinson. I'm not surprised by that. I think they'll take their time with Wan'Dale. I think Sterling Shepard's was much more minor. It was also earlier in the year.
Today's July 25th, and that first game is what? September 4th?
Something like that.
That's still a ways away.
Yeah, I personally think Sterling Shepard will be good. I think Aaron Robinson probably will be good. Mm-hmm. Everybody else I'm unsure about. I don't know. What do you... Well, and also I think Jamison Crowder is just like off this roster pretty soon.
I agree with that. Yeah, I kind of agree with you too. There are things I was reading with the same things you about Sterling Shepard, that he was moving around well. I guess I wonder if those two things were related. Signing Beasley says, okay, let's put him on PUP for right now, and affording us the time to take our time with it. There's no reason to rush him back. There's no reason to run extra drills and stuff, because it's Sterling Shepard. We know what he can do. Mm-hmm. It's not like he has to prove himself or anything, and he's probably in better shape than he normally would be going to training camp because he's been rehabbing all this time. So I'm not overly concerned about that. I'd rather err on the side of caution for someone like him, that, if he's healthy and available, that's an important piece that we kind of forget about. Talking about all the additions to the wide receiver room and everything. And I think having him healthy, having that veteran leadership who's been around here for a while, who still can be a really good cog in this offense. I just don't want to rush it.
Yeah, and I think bringing Cole Beasley is like, okay, so for training camp when we're practicing our offense, this guy can play the slot and he will be in the right spot. He's not going to fuck up an assignment. But when it comes to game time, is Cole Beasley going to be here? I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I think that might be more dependent on Wan'Dale. If Wan'Dale and Sterling are both healthy at the start of the year, I think Cole Beasley's gone, right?
Yes, and I'd rather have Wan'Dale and Sterling Shepard over Cole Beasley.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Cole Beasley's only like a year younger than me. So, which means he probably has rickets and
does he have hair?
Burn. Thanks.
Yeah.
A'Shawn Robinson and DJ Davidson, two really big pieces in the middle, physically big pieces. A'Shawn Robinson big in terms of important, DJ Davidson less so, but when you got two big bodies missing, both are important at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So they brought in a number of, do I want to say scrub?
Bodies.
Not elite talent.
Let's call them bodies.
Yeah,
right
they
now.
brought in some
Too
bodies
nice.
here. Do you know the nature of A'Shawn Robinson's injury?
I do not.
Yeah, I don't either.
It was a little surprising to me, actually.
Yeah, me too. DJ Davidson got hurt fairly late last year, and when
Right.
bigger guys get hurt with lower body injuries, I always expect like a longer timetable. I know people think like, oh, wide receivers, they cut on those knees and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, but they do that their whole lives. Big guys don't cut on nothing. So you have a lot more weight bearing down on those
And big guys are
ligaments.
carrying more weight too.
Yes, So, DJ Davidson, I think he'll come along when he comes along. Same thing with Marcus McKeithen, another big guy, real big guy. So, whatever. Aaron Robinson's the one. I really hope that I have high aspirations for him in this defense specifically. It almost feels like this defense was made for a guy like him to play slot and be really physical and aggressive and make big tackles in the run game and blitz the quarterback and shit. And we still haven't gotten to see it, and it's starting to frustrate me.
I was gonna say he may be the perfect person for this defense, but I don't think his body is the perfect body to play NFL football because he just can't get on the field and stay on the field. So It's frustrating. Again, let's hope things go well in these next 6 weeks, and he's ready to get out there because you're right. He is exciting to see. What he can do in this defense. We don't know.
Yeah. I don't want to make this any longer than it needs to be. We're just short of 25 minutes. I don't have any other final thoughts other than I want to watch these guys progress. Some of these guys may come off the PUP list in the next couple of days. Some of them will take weeks. It's possible that some will take over a month. So we'll see. I'm interested to see what goes on. As you're listening to this, I believe is the first media-covered training camp practice. So enjoy that, and we will see you there. Do you have any final thoughts, Cranky fan, or did we cover it all?
I think we covered it. Welcome back training camp. Let's hope everybody gets through training camp healthy. We don't want to add to the IR list or any aggravations or depth issues before the season even starts. So that's my biggest goal for this this training camp. Let's get out of here healthy.
Hell yeah. All right, we will see you guys next week. Until then, go Giants.
Giants.